What if, one day, everything you've worked for, loved, and built your life around was suddenly taken from you? For Job, a man known for his unwavering faith, this nightmare became his reality. His family, his health, his wealth, everything was gone in an instant. But the most shocking part? God, the one he trusted above all, remained silent as Job faced unimaginable loss. The silence from heaven grew louder. Could he still trust in God when everything seemed to be falling apart? Job's story forces us to ask, what happens when faith is tested to its very limits? If you are ready to declare your trust, even when it feels like everything is falling apart, type 777 below. By doing so, you stand in agreement with Job's unwavering belief. A heartfelt thank you to those who support through Super Thanks. You are part of this journey of faith and strength. Now, stay with us as we delve deeper into Job's incredible journey. What happened next will challenge your beliefs and inspire your own walk of faith. The shocking story of Job. When faith is pushed to the limit, watch now. In the ancient land of Uz, there was a man named Job, a man whose name echoed through the region as a symbol of righteousness and integrity. His life was marked by unwavering devotion to God, and his actions reflected a pure heart that sought nothing but goodness. Job was known far and wide not only for his wealth but also for his deep reverence for the Creator. He was a man who walked in the ways of virtue, a man who feared God with a reverence that seemed unmatched by anyone around him. He was truly a man of substance. Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters, each of them a blessing in his life. His wealth was vast. He owned 7,000 sheep, 0,000 camels, 500 oxen, and 500 donkeys. These were not mere numbers, but the embodiment of his prosperity, a testimony of his success, his diligence, and the favor God had bestowed upon him. With such riches, Job was not only the wealthiest man in Uz, but also the most respected. His name was synonymous with honor, fairness, and piety. As Job sat in the quiet of his home, surrounded by his family and countless servants, it would be easy to believe that his life was without turmoil, without fear, without the shadow of suffering. Yet, unbeknownst to him, the stage was being set for a trial unlike any other, a test of his faith, his endurance, and his very soul. But what happens when a man who has everything finds that everything he holds dear could be taken away in an instant? One day, as the celestial realm stood before God, the angels gathered to present themselves, a solemn assembly that echoed with divine purpose. Among them, a darker presence slipped into the gathering: Satan, the adversary. His entrance did not go unnoticed, and with the timeless authority of the Creator, God inquired, "Where have you come from?" with an air of defiance. Satan responded, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 whispers from roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it. His words hung in the air, charged with a sense of restless purpose, as though he sought not just to observe, but to test the very fabric of creation itself. God, in his infinite wisdom, spoke next, his voice steady but heavy, with a question that held the power to change the course of events. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on the earth, blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Satan's reply was laced with disdain, a challenge that carried the weight of his ancient cynicism. Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not placed a hedge around him, protecting everything he has? You've blessed him beyond measure. But if you stretch out your hand and strike all that he possesses, he will surely curse you to your face. A moment of silence followed, as the weight of the words hung between them. God, in his boundless wisdom, gave Satan permission. Very well. He said, "Everything Job has is in your power, but you must not lay a finger on the man himself." It was an ordinary day, the sun hanging lazily in the sky, when Job sat at home, surrounded by the comfort of his wealth and his family. Yet, what began as a peaceful moment quickly turned into a storm of devastation. It started with the arrival of a messenger, running toward him, breathless, his face pale with fear. He barely managed to speak through the terror that gripped him. The oxen were plowing, and the donkeys were grazing nearby when the Sabaeans attacked. They took the animals, and they killed the servants. I am the only one who escaped. Before Job could fully comprehend the enormity of this loss, another messenger burst through the door, his eyes wide with horror. The fire of God. He gasped. It fell from the heavens, consuming the sheep and the servants alike. I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. And just as Job was reeling from this terrible news, a third messenger appeared, his face stricken with grief. "The Chaldeans," he began, barely able to steady his voice. "They formed 3 raiding parties. They attacked your camels and took them, slaying the servants in their wake. I am the only one who has escaped, but the worst was yet to come." As the third messenger's words echoed in the air, a fourth burst in, his entire being trembling with disbelief. "Your sons and daughters," he said, his voice breaking. "They were feasting and drinking wine at their oldest brother's house when a mighty wind came from across the desert. It struck the 4 corners of the house, and it collapsed upon them. They are all dead. I am the only one who escaped to tell you." In the span of moments, Job's world had unraveled. His wealth had vanished. His household, once vibrant with the laughter of children, lay shattered. His beloved children were gone, swallowed by a force beyond his understanding. And in that moment, when every reason for despair was before him, Job stood. He tore his robe in mourning, and with grief weighing down upon him, he shaved his head, a symbol of his deepest sorrow. Yet, in the midst of it all, he did not crumble. He did not lash out in anger or curse God. Instead, he fell to the ground in reverence, his heart overwhelmed, and he spoke the words that would echo through history. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In that moment of profound loss, Job did not sin. He did not accuse God of wrong. Instead, he acknowledged a divine sovereignty that transcended his understanding, a strength that, even in the darkest of moments, anchored him in faith. How could a man, stripped of everything, still find the will to worship? What kind of faith could endure such a trial? The answer lies in the depths of Job's soul, in a belief so unwavering that not even the fiercest storm could erode it. Some time passed, and once again, Satan appeared before God, as he had done before. The heavens, vast and silent, held their breath as the adversary entered the divine courtroom. God, with the same calm authority, asked, "Where have you come from?" "Satan, ever restless," replied, his voice dripping with a dark satisfaction. "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it," the words echoed, a reminder of the endless search for weakness in creation, as though the earth itself were a hunting ground for his schemes. God, unwavering in his gaze, turned to Satan and spoke of a man whose soul stood untouched by the storms of life. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth, blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil, and despite everything, he still maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without cause." God's words carried weight, like a shield of truth laid before the adversary. Yet there was no boast in his tone, only the quiet acknowledgement of Job's steadfastness. But Satan, relentless in his disdain, responded with a challenge, cold as stone, skin for skin. A man will give all he has for his own life. But now, stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face. His words were a trap, a taunt wrapped in a veneer of logic, seeking to provoke God's patience. God, with a measure of divine calm, spoke again, the decision now set in motion. "Very well, he is in your hands, but spare his life." And with that, the scene shifted. Satan, with a malevolent glint in his eyes, departed from the divine presence. The stage was set once more for a test that would pierce to the very core of human faith. Job had already been stripped of his wealth, his children, and his peace. What would happen now, when even his very body would be assaulted? Satan's cruel attack on Job was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The pain that ravaged Job's body was beyond comprehension. His skin erupted in painful boils, inflamed sores that spread across every inch of his flesh, from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. His body, once strong and healthy, now writhed in agony, each movement a cruel reminder of the torment that had overtaken him. His skin blistered and cracked under the weight of the infection, and from the open wounds, pus oozed relentlessly, staining his clothes and his spirit. Job could barely move without excruciating pain, and the weight of his suffering seemed to echo in the silence of the world around him. He had lost everything, his wealth, in his children, his peace, and now his health was stripped away, leaving him a shadow of the man he once was. He wandered to the edge of the city, to the place where refuse and ashes were discarded, a forsaken place where brokenness and despair seemed to take root. It was there, in the midst of this desolation, that Job sat, alone and humiliated. The once great man, now reduced to a pitiful figure, took a jagged shard of pottery, its broken edges sharp against his fevered skin. With trembling hands, he scraped at the sores on his body, desperate for even the smallest relief, though it never came. And then, as if the universe itself conspired to strip him of all dignity, his wife, the only one left by his side, approached him. Her eyes were hollow, drained of the hope and love that once filled them. Grief had aged her, and in her sorrow, her words were sharp and bitter. "Are you still holding on to your integrity?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Curse God and die." Job looked at her, not with anger, but with a sorrowful understanding. his heart, weighed down by the loss of his children, the pain in his body, and the isolation that surrounded him, still clung to something far deeper than his circumstances. He turned to her and spoke not in condemnation, but in a quiet, steady faith. You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we accept good from God and not also accept trouble? In that moment, Job's words echoed the very core of his faith. Despite everything, despite the loss, the agony, and the bitter isolation, he chose to trust. He understood that faith wasn't just about receiving blessings, but about enduring the trials that came, knowing that God's sovereignty remained unchallenged. And in all this suffering, Job did not sin with his lips. He did not curse God. He did not allow his pain to speak louder than his faith. Satan's cruel attack on Job was unlike anything the world had ever seen. The pain that ravaged Job's body was beyond comprehension. His skin erupted in painful boils, inflamed sores that spread across every inch of his flesh. From the crown of his head to the soles of his feet, his body, once strong and healthy, now writhed in agony. Each movement a cruel reminder of the torment that had overtaken him. His skin blistered and cracked under the weight of the infection, and from the open wounds, pus oozed relentlessly, staining his clothes and his spirit. Job could barely move without excruciating pain, and the weight of his suffering seemed to echo in the silence of the world around him. He had lost everything: his wealth, his children, his peace, and now his health was stripped away, leaving him a shadow of the man he once was. He wandered to the edge of the city, to the place where refuse and ashes were discarded, a forsaken place where brokenness and despair seemed to take root. It was there, in the midst of this desolation, that Job sat, alone and humiliated. The once great man, now reduced to a pitiful figure, took a jagged shard of pottery, its broken edges sharp against his fevered skin. With trembling hands, he scraped at the sores on his body, desperate for even the smallest relief, though it never came. And then, as if the universe itself conspired to strip him of all dignity, his wife, the only one left by his side, approached him. Her eyes were hollow, drained of the hope and love that once filled them. Grief had aged her, and in her sorrow, her words were sharp and bitter. "Are you still holding on to your integrity?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Curse God and die." Job looked at her, not with anger, but with a sorrowful understanding. His heart, weighed down by the loss of his children, the pain in his body, and the isolation that surrounded him, still clung to something far deeper than his circumstances. He turned to her and spoke not in condemnation, but in a quiet, steady faith. "You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we accept good from God and not also accept trouble?" In that moment, Job's words echoed the very core of his faith. Despite everything, despite the loss, the agony, and the bitter isolation, he chose to trust. He understood that faith wasn't just about receiving blessings, but about enduring the trials that came, knowing that God's sovereignty remained unchallenged. And in all this suffering, Job did not sin with his lips. He did not curse God. He did not allow his pain to speak louder than his faith. It was a test unlike any other, not just of his body, but of his very soul. Would his faith endure when all that he had known and loved had been taken away? Would Job continue to worship the God who had allowed such torment to visit him, though stripped of wealth, children, and health? He remained steadfast. Through every trial, Job's faith did not waver. When Job's 3 friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard of the terrible misfortune that had befallen him, they could not remain in their distant homes. United by a singular purpose, they set out to find Job, not to offer solutions or judgments, but to mourn with him and offer what little comfort they could. They had known Job as a man of unparalleled strength and wisdom, a man who was revered, blessed, and noble, respected by all who encountered him. His life had been one of prosperity and honor, a reflection of divine favor. But when they approached the place where Job sat, what they saw struck them to their core. From a distance, they saw the figure of a man, but the man they once knew seemed no longer to exist. Job was sitting in the ashes, his body covered in sores, scraping himself with a broken piece of pottery, as if the very fabric of his existence had been torn apart. They could hardly recognize him. The sight was so overwhelming that it shook them to their foundations. In their grief, they raised their voices in sorrow and wept aloud, their hearts broken for the man who had once been their friend, now reduced to this state of misery. Each of them tore his robe in mourning, and they sprinkled dust on their heads, a symbolic gesture of deep sorrow and shared grief. It was as if, in that moment, they entered into Job's suffering alongside him. And then they did something extraordinary. They sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, silent, for they could see the enormity of his grief. They did not try to speak. They did not offer empty words of comfort. They simply sat, sharing the space of his suffering, offering no judgment, no advice, just their presence, an unspoken acknowledgement of the pain that consumed him. 7 days passed in this way, without a word, and yet, in the silence, their companionship spoke volumes. After the long silence, Job, unable to bear the weight of his sorrow any longer, broke the stillness. He opened his mouth, and what followed were words of profound despair. Job cursed the day of his birth. Let the day perish on which I was born, and the night that said, a man is conceived. The very moment of his existence, Job now saw as a mistake. To him, his birth felt like the opening of a door that should never have been opened, a door that led to nothing but suffering. In his deepest grief, he wished for a world where he had never been born, where sorrow had never found him. Why did I not perish at birth, or die as I came from the womb? He lamented. If only he had died in that moment. He believed. Then he would be at peace, free from the unbearable pain that gripped him. His words, filled with anguish, revealed the depth of his torment. All Job wanted was for it all to stop, to escape the relentless weight of his suffering, to find rest in the silence of death, where no pain could reach him. In this moment, Job's pain was so intense that it consumed him entirely. The man who had once known only blessing now found himself in the throes of an unimaginable despair, questioning the very foundation of his existence. Job's friends had been silent for so long, but now, seeing the depths of his despair, they could no longer remain quiet. The suffering before them was too much, too inexplicable, and in their minds, It must have been the result of something Job had done wrong. Eliphaz, the first to speak, broke the silence, his voice carrying the weight of his conviction. Job, will you be angry if I speak the truth? No innocent man ever suffers like this. God punishes the wicked. Perhaps, somewhere, you did something wrong. He marched after mine. Job, defiant, his heart heavy with frustration and disbelief, shot back. What truth? You twist my pain into proof of some imagined guilt. I know my heart. God knows it too. Even if he crushes me for no reason. He marched after mine. Bildad, not to be outdone, interjected with his own harsh reasoning. How long will you speak like this? Your children. Maybe they sinned. God is just. If you were truly good, he would not let this happen. Lating one's Job, his voice rising in anger, retorted, you blame the dead. You mock me in my grief. If God would answer me, I'd plead my case before him, but he hides while I rot, abandoned in my suffering. Lating one's, then Zophar, with a stern tone, continued, stop lying to yourself. Such pride, God sees your wickedness. You've only brought this upon yourself. Beg for mercy before it's too late. But Cat, the debate raged on, with Job clinging to his innocence and the conviction that he had done no wrong. While his friends grew more certain of his sin, they had turned from companions to judges, convinced that Job's suffering must be the result of his actions. But despite their accusations and their insistence on his guilt, Job continued to hold on to his integrity, refusing to accept that he had done anything to deserve the torment that had befallen him. As the words flew back and forth, the storm of emotions and accusations intensified. But somewhere, beyond the bitter debate, beyond the accusations and the despair, God was listening. In the silence that followed their words, the divine presence remained, aware of Job's pain, aware of the trial that was unfolding. The heavens were silent, but they were not absent. God was listening, even as Job and his friends struggled to understand the truth of what was happening. After the long silence, after Job's cries of despair, and after the endless speeches of his friends, the moment finally came. The Almighty, the Creator of the heavens and the earth, broke through the storm with a voice that thundered with power, shaking the very foundations of the world. From the whirlwind, the Lord answered Job, his words sharp, direct, and filled with unyielding authority. Who is this that speaks without knowledge? Prepare yourself like a man. I will question you, and you will answer me. These must dead. God's voice roared with divine strength, but each word carried a deeper purpose, challenging Job to see the vastness of the universe, the limits of human understanding, and the sovereignty of the Creator. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me. If you have understanding, who determined its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched the measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone while the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? The questions continued, each one drawing Job deeper into the enormity of creation. Have you ever commanded the morning to appear and caused the dawn to know its place? Have you ever guided the stars in their paths across the sky, or set their courses in the heavens? Do you send the lightning bolts, and do they report to you? Here we are. Who gives strength to the horse and commands it to run with such power? Can you hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the raven when it calls for food. As God's voice echoed through the storm, the Creator painted a vivid picture of His dominion over all of creation, the heavens above, the seas below, the storms that rage, and the creatures of every shape and form, from the wild ox to the soaring eagle, from the towering mountains to the deep oceans, from the mighty behemoth that roams the earth to the terrifying leviathan that rules the seas in creatures beyond human comprehension or control. These were all within His grasp, created by His hand, subject to His will. God's questions grew even more direct. Can you pull in Leviathan with a hook? Can you tie down its tongue with a rope, or put a noose around its jaw? Can you make it your servant? Who then is able to stand against me? Who can challenge the might of the Creator, the one who holds the entire universe in His hand? In these words, God didn't just question Job's understanding of the world. He revealed the magnitude of His power and wisdom. The very fabric of creation was woven together by His will. And Job, like all of humanity, stood in awe of its vastness. God was reminding Job and reminding us all that the Creator's wisdom and power are beyond measure, beyond human comprehension. And in the face of such divine majesty, what right do we have to question His ways? When God finished speaking, a heavy silence fell over Job. The mighty voice of the Creator, full of authority and wisdom, had pierced the darkness. And Job, feeling utterly small in comparison, was left speechless. His soul was humbled, and he realized the vast gulf between his understanding and the infinite wisdom of God. He spoke only after a long pause, his words full of humility. I am nothing. What can I say to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I will say no more. In that moment, Job understood that he had tried to grasp the reasons behind his suffering, but God's plan, His wisdom, was far beyond his comprehension. Job's heart shifted with a newfound respect. He spoke again, not with defiance, but with a deep sense of trust and reverence. I know that you can do all things. No plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that hides knowledge without understanding? I confess, I am that person. I had heard of you before, but now, with my own eyes, I have seen you. I take back what I said, and I am sorry for the words I spoke in my pain. Job humbled himself before the Almighty, acknowledging that even in his suffering, God's wisdom and power were greater than anything he could ever understand. Job recognized the limits of his human perspective and chose to trust in God's sovereign will, even when the path before him remained unclear. In response to Job's humility, the Lord spoke to Eliphaz, one of Job's friends, with words of correction and grace. You and your 2 friends have not spoken accurately about me, as my servant Job has. Now, offer a burnt offering for yourselves, and my servant Job will pray for you. Eliphaz and the others obeyed the Lord's command, and when Job prayed for them, God was pleased. As Job's prayers were offered on behalf of his friends, God's favor poured out upon him. The Lord restored Job's fortunes, blessing him with twice as much as he had before. He received 14,000 sheep, 0,000 camels, 0,000 oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. And, as a final blessing, Job was given 7 sons and 3 daughters. His new daughters were the most beautiful in the land, And after living a long life, Job was able to see 4 generations of his descendants. Job lived another 140 years, his heart at peace, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, filled with joy for the legacy of faith he had passed down. Finally, Job died an old man, full of years, his life a testament to the endurance of faith, the greatness of God's wisdom, and the restoration of everything that had been lost. Job's story reminds us of something deeply significant, something that echoes through time. Just as Satan once accused Job before God, he continues to accuse us today. He came before God and said, "Job only worships you because you bless him." He twisted Job's unwavering faith into a mere transaction, claiming that God's goodness was nothing more than a bribe to gain worship. This is the nature of the accuser. He distorts the truth, sows seeds of doubt, and whispers lies into our hearts. He says, "You don't deserve God's love. You've already fallen short. So why not continue down that path?" Or he suggests, "You must have done something wrong to deserve this." But Jesus came to offer something entirely different. He did not come as an accuser. He came as our defender. The Bible tells us, if anyone sins, we have an advocate before the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. Through Jesus, we find a Savior, not someone who condemns us, but someone who stands in our place, offering grace and mercy. On the cross, Jesus silenced every lie the accuser could ever speak. When Satan points to your pain and tries to convince you that God has abandoned you, Jesus points to his scars and says, "You are forgiven. You are mine." In the midst of our suffering, we are not left alone in condemnation. We are reminded that the cross is the ultimate victory over every lie, over every accusation. Through Jesus, our sin is covered, and our standing before God is secure, not because of our own merit, but because of his unshakable love for us. Being faithful to God does not guarantee that life will always be easy. We will encounter pain, face troubles, and experience moments that seem impossible to understand. God's ways are higher than ours, his wisdom deeper than anything we can comprehend. There will be times when we simply won't know why things happen the way they do. And that's okay. It's okay to cry when we hurt, to ask questions when confusion sets in, and even to feel angry at the circumstances. God never expects us to have all the answers, but he does call us to trust in his sovereignty, to believe that he is good, even when life feels unfair. God allows suffering not as punishment, but as a tool to shape us, to strengthen us, and to grow our faith in ways we never imagined. Each trial, each heartache, serves as a stepping stone toward a deeper, a more resilient trust in him, though it may be hard to see in the moment. God is at work behind the scenes, refining our character and preparing us for something greater. And in his perfect time, God restores. He brings new hope where there was once despair, new joy where there was sorrow, and new life where death had taken root. Job's journey is a powerful reminder that even in our darkest hours, we are never truly alone. No matter the storm we face, God's love is greater, his faithfulness unshakable. He walks with us through every trial, and in the end, he will always bring us to a place of healing and restoration. As we reflect on Job's journey, we realize a powerful truth that echoes through the ages. Faith isn't just about the moments of blessing, but about holding on when the storms come. Job's story reminds us that life can be filled with hardship, pain, and questions we may never have the answers to. Yet even in the most painful seasons, we are called to trust in God's greater plan, knowing that His ways are higher than ours, and His love never fails. In our daily lives, we face our own struggles, whether it's personal loss, difficult relationships, financial stress, or health challenges. It may seem like the world is unraveling, and we may question, why me? But like Job, we have a choice to let our pain shape us into someone stronger, more compassionate, and more resilient, or to let it define us with bitterness and despair. Job showed us that it's okay to feel the weight of our emotions, but we must also choose to trust in God's goodness, even when life feels unfair. In today's world, we are constantly seeking answers, looking for quick fix, and wondering why things don't always go our way. But the truth is, the journey of faith is not about instant results or understanding every detail. It's about surrendering to God's wisdom, trusting that He sees the bigger picture when we can't. And just like Job, we can emerge from our trials stronger, more refined, and more connected to the purpose God has for us. So, if you're going through a storm right now, know that you're not alone. God is with you in your pain, and He is working to restore, renew, and bring beauty from the ashes. Hold on to the hope that Job's story provides a reminder that even in the darkest moments, God's love remains unwavering. If this message resonated with you, I encourage you to take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a message of encouragement. And leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or experiences. Let's continue to build a community of faith and resilience. Thank you for your support. And remember, no matter what you're facing, God's love is greater than any storm you're walking through. Keep the faith. Keep trusting. You are never alone.